When a young woman goes missing with her 3-year-old son in Scotland, rumors flood Inverness about the secrecy in her life and the strange events of the cold night. Unsolved to this day, this is Britain's longest running missing persons case to date. With the police force and community determined to uncover the truth, will it finally be resolved after 45 years? This is the mysterious disappearance of Renee and Andrew MacRae.
Hello once again, listeners. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Hallie.
And we are so excited that you're back listening again to another episode.
Tuning on in.
This time we're going a little international and exploring Scotland.
Just a little tidbit of information. We did this case a while ago because we were actually going to go study abroad, both of us, in Scotland for our masters, and everything got messed up with this pandemic, as we all know. So we had to push this case off, and we were like, hey, why not do it right now since we're not going to go to Scotland anymore?
If you can't travel in real life, you travel in true crime. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook for all the updates, funny memes, pictures, just things we find interesting and think that you guys might appreciate. Also, if you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe. That helps us out so much. And
give us a thumbs up.
Yes, please give us a thumbs up. And make sure to go to our website, theabysspod.com, and see all the show notes, all of our sources, and lots of pictures from these cases. This is one that has a lot of interesting pictures from it, so make sure you go check that out. If you're feeling a little extra generous, we do have a Patreon that you can toss a couple bucks each month our way, and that helps us offset some of the costs of running the podcast, so we would very much appreciate that if you feel so inclined. So without further ado, let's jump into the abyss.
Renee MacRae, who was born under the name Christina Catherine MacDonald, I don't know how she got switched to Renee. We know MacRae is from the marriage, but don't know how she came up with the nickname Renee. But she was born in February of 1940 in Inverness, Scotland, which is kind of exciting. If you guys watch Outlander, we both watch Outlander, and you know, it's all like Inverness, Culloden. We talk about Culloden Battlefield in here. It's kind of cool. Okay, keep going. So Renee was married to a man named Gordon MacRae, but they had separated at the time. They had already filed for divorce and found other partners in their lives, but they had really decided to stay good friends, possibly for their children, since they had 2 together named Gordon, who was 7, and Andrew, who was 3. And so that could have been a reason. Also, they could have just, really cared about each other and decided to stay in that friendship together. Gordon had been living with his secretary during their divorce, and they actually would later get married. And Renee was seeing someone that she was keeping pretty private and separate from her relationship with Gordon. She didn't really talk to him about it. He didn't know who she was seeing, and it was something they just kind of let be. Renee was described by her best friend Valerie Steventon as a, quote, happy, down-to-earth, responsible, and devoted mother. She was willing to do a good turn for anybody at any time. She would really put herself out to help you. She was one of the best, end quote. On November 12th in 1976, Renee was 36 years old at the time, and she left her home with her 2 sons, Andrew and Gordon, and she dropped Gordon off with his dad, but then kept Andrew with her. She had met with her friend that day, and Renee told Gordon that she was going to drive to her sister's, who is Morag Govins, and that her and Andrew were just going to be spending some time with her. It was really well known to the people who knew Renee that she hated driving and that it was going to be really bad weather that night. I think they had even said this big storm was coming through. And so Gordon offered to buy her a train ticket to her location so she didn't have to drive, but she refused this offer and just kind of waved goodbye to Gordon, her 7-year-old son, and then left with Andrew, who was 3 at the time, as we stated before. They headed on to the A9 towards Perth to visit her sister in Kilmarnock. We might butcher some of these names, and we apologize if we do, but she was in her blue BMW, and they were hitting the road. She was seen driving on A9 by a colleague of hers who was the parent of one of her son's friends at school. And this was around 6 p.m. She noticed that Renee was driving really carefully because of the winding roads and the inclement weather. It was like super dark out. It was rainy. We've all been there where like you can barely see in front of you because the rain is just like downpouring. This parent noticed that whenever they reached the Meow Moor lay-by, Renee was pulled over and just parked on the side. It's kind of like a little pull-off, it looks like a little, how would you describe that? Kind of like a long biker's lane.
Yeah, kind of like a shoulder, but like curved.
Yeah, like meant for people to be able to pull off if need be. Over the next few hours, the car was noted by several passersby to be parked, empty, and the lights in the engine were switched off.
Also, side note, it may seem a little weird that everyone could like pinpoint that this was Renee's car, but BMWs were actually very rare in Scotland, and they had only basically come to Scotland the year before. So it was a pretty distinct car, and it was like a distinct color, distinct make. So that's why people were able to really say like, oh, I recognize that. That's her.
Yeah, not to mention that back then, Inverness probably wasn't very big. I know there's a lot of like greenery and nature outside of the city, and she was married to a really wealthy man at the time who owned a business and things like that. So back in the day, he probably knew a lot of people, and so did she. So it's not abnormal that people were like, oh, that's Renee's car. Around 9:30 p.m., it was noted that the car was gone. Nobody knew where it was. It just wasn't there anymore. Maybe she had started it and driven away, but nobody saw it after that. A little after 10 o'clock at night, it was seen for the last time. It was about 6 miles down the road from its previous location at the lay-by, and it was in a different secluded lay-by called Dalmagary. A bus driver named Cole McGregor saw these flickering flames and smelt smoke and went to investigate, and this is when he found the BMW burning off on this pull around, I guess is what you can kind of call it. It was kind of like what you would think of a rest stop where there's kind of an incline and you like go up and there's a pull off where you can park and things and then you can come back, but there were trees blocking it. We have pictures on our website that you can see if you're curious. When police arrived, they noted that the car was empty, nobody was present, and they traced the car to Gordon a couple days later, who said it was being used by his wife to go on their trip. This probably raised some concern.
Around the time that Gordon was contacted by the police about the car being found burning, he also realized that Renee had not picked up their son from school that day, as had been the plan, and something she always did. She wasn't like a flaky person. She was a good parent that was always there when she said she was going to be. So we're not exactly sure the exact order of those events, because obviously both of them are pretty significant to her disappearance, but they all happened within that couple of day period. So at this point, he knows that the car's been found burning, and the police know that Renee has now not shown up for her commitments and that there's a real issue. The next stop for the police was Renee's best friend, Valerie. They thought if anyone knew what was going on in her life, it would be her. And Valerie had a lot to say. She was pretty much forced to confess that Renee's new partner was actually a man that she'd been having an affair with for the past 5 years. So Gordon and Renee had been separated for a year, and about 4 years previous to that, she had been with this man named Bill McDowell, and he actually worked for Gordon as an accountant. Like we said before, Renee had been pretty hush-hush about her new partner. She didn't want Gordon to know exactly who it was, so when he found out it was someone that he knew pretty well, it was probably quite a shock. And, surprise to no one, Gordon fired Bill pretty much immediately when he found out. Bill was also married to a woman named Rosemary, and he had 2 daughters with her. And Valerie found out in the spring of 1973 that Renee was with Bill. And this was after the affair had been going on for 2 years, so Renee really kept that secret tight. And the reason that Renee told Valerie at that point was because she was actually pregnant with her second son, Andrew. And as it turned out, Andrew was actually the biological son of Bill and not Gordon. Valerie also said that Renee was not actually ever going to her sister's. She was actually going to meet Bill. She had packed a suitcase for her and Andrew and had his stroller and blankets, and they were all set to go to Perth together. Valerie was super upset, obviously, about her best friend going missing. She said, quote, "On the Monday and Tuesday after she disappeared, I stood on the platform at Inverness expecting her to show up. But as the days went by, it was clear to me that something was terribly wrong. I remember the final moments we spent together on the Friday she disappeared. She seemed excited about the new life she had planned with Bill and was so full of life. I was happy for her. Who wouldn't be? That last meeting still haunts me to this day," end quote. So not only were Bill and Renee going on vacation, they were actually planning to start a new life together in Shetland. Bill claimed he was trying to get a job with the Texaco there, and he was going to buy a house for he and Renee. And after this Perth vacation, they were going to tell their respective spouses that they were moving and starting over. Valerie also said that Bill had basically told Renee to bring Andrew on this vacation, despite him being pretty disinterested in involvement with Andrew in the past. So that was a little bit odd. Valerie really didn't trust Bill. She was very suspicious of him and pretty much said that he was lying about everything just to keep Renee around, that he wasn't really planning on leaving his wife, that he wasn't going to move, he wasn't going to start this new life with her, and he was just leading her on. Bill told the police and the media that he was not involved in any way and pretty much refused to speak a whole bunch on it. He denied having any solid weekend plans. He was really vague about it. And he told the media that the affair was over and he never intended to move, start a new life, or any of that. He also said that he had received phone calls after Renee disappeared that told him that they were alive and well and just in hiding, which, if nothing else made you suspicious, I feel like that would. Sometime after Renee disappeared, Bill actually tried to give a voluntary statement, but his wife, Rosemary, apparently stormed into the interview room and basically dragged him out and told the officers to leave them alone.
Fishy, fishy, fishy. The police then completed a forensic examination of the car. It was determined that it was deliberately set on fire. The only thing that they could find was Andrew's boot, which was found relatively intact, and there was supposedly a little bit of blood on the inside. His blanket was also present and was stained with a little bit of blood as well. The antler suitcase and the stroller, though, were both missing. They weren't anywhere in the vehicle. There was also a little stain of blood on the rug in the car. I don't know why they call it a rug, but like that little car placemat thingy. And it supposedly matched the MacRae's blood type. All in all, it's clear that they would suspect foul play. There's blood. The car was deliberately set on fire. There's no reason not to expect that something more malicious happened here. The police did an intensive search and investigation. They asked everyone that they could, but most people weren't really out in that kind of weather. It was super dangerous, and if you've ever been over there, which I haven't, but I have heard that the roads are like super windy and all over the place, so somewhere where it may only be like 20 miles away could take you like an hour to get there. So I can imagine that a lot of people weren't out on the road with it being dark and rainy and cold. I think there was snow involved, and so wasn't a very nice night. It was hard for them to really find people who saw what happened other than the statements we've already mentioned. Also, the snow and rain wiped away most of the evidence, so it was really hard to discover anything that may have been left behind. They decided to put a missing persons poster up and circulated it through the entirety of the UK to every police station. They really went hard. They wanted to make sure that if she is anywhere, we will find her, And Gordon MacRae even chipped in and offered a £1,000 reward for information. Initially, the police stated that the case was damaged by lying and deception, and there were all these secrets, which we know there were some secrets, but many people took this as a little nudge to start pretty much attacking Renee and her reputation, and they kind of marked her as the Scarlet Woman, and that she had been married to this super wealthy man and was having an affair for years, and this kid who was this affair's son, and yada yada. It got crazy. Everyone from her family to friends and even Gordon himself went against all of these statements and defended her character, which says a lot. You know, people thought she was a really great person and they were like, don't think ill of her because of this, which I thought was very smart, because a lot of times when you see people, you know, calling out that someone made mistakes in their life, which we all make mistakes, it somehow deters the investigation. Not, you know, deliberately, but a lot of people are like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Even though it really does, it still matters.
Yeah, people use stuff like that to justify not caring about certain people and certain crimes. And it's really sad, especially when Gordon himself, which is arguably the only person that really
deserves to be upset in this situation.
And even he's like, you need to stop. Like, she was a good person. She was a good mom. Like, she wouldn't do this on her own. And, you know, even if she made mistakes, that it's not her fault that something happened to her. So even if he's, especially when he's saying that, like, obviously, even if he wasn't, she still doesn't deserve to whatever happened. But
that's just more proof that, like,
when, like,
sit down.
Yeah. When the person that deserves to be upset is like, you need to stop, then you should really stop.
Yeah. And plus, that's why you see so many cases where people attack, you know, sex workers and things like that. And the police don't do anything for so long because they're just like, whatever. But it's like, that is an individual, you know, and that is a person, and they deserve just as much help as anybody else.
And you should be able to separate the things that people have done and their value as a human being, and their, you know, deserving to be safe and happy and healthy.
Needless to say, the police department in Inverness had to come out and kind of fix things because it was getting a little out of hand in the community. So Donald MacArthur of the Inverness Police made a statement saying, quote, "She was not a fast-living, high-stepping woman. Basically, she was an unhappy woman. In company, she tended to withdraw. She went home early. She would be fairly lonely. She had a few friends apart from Valerie Steventon. She was separated from her husband, and I think she may have felt a little inadequate," end quote. I don't really feel like this is a great apology, but maybe in Scotland, that's good. I don't really know. In America, that's not really a good apology.
Might have to chalk it up to cultural differences.
Yeah. This was kind of a way to halt the gossip and accusations that were being thrown at Renee's reputation and to keep from just like tearing her apart, basically. Later on in 1976, this was the same year that she and Andrew went missing, the police ended up staging a complete reconstruction to hopefully help locals kind of remember anything that they may have saw, kind of spark, you know how sometimes they'll be like, here, smell this candle, and it'll like spark a memory of that night or something. So they were hoping it would, but nothing really came from it.
In 1977, there was still no trace of Renee or Andrew, so police started looking into the surrounding quarries. They looked into Lanark Quarry near Culloden Battlefield. Unfortunately, searching the quarry was an extremely difficult endeavor. It was very hazardous and pretty expensive to get all the equipment. They decided to use a camera and moved it in the water to search, and they even believe that they found skeletal remains and sent in Navy divers to search further. But this turned out to be a crumpled plastic bag that had some household items in it, so it kind of looked like a skull, but it was just some trash.
That had to be really disappointing to go through all that effort, get the divers out there, and then be like, just kidding, someone threw their garbage away.
Yeah, that was probably a blow to their confidence and just the whole investigation. The divers said that the visibility in the quarry water was pretty bad, and the silt at the bottom was being stirred up as they swam through the water. So it was basically just impossible to search well, and they ended up calling off that search.
Which, by the way, I'm a pretty visual person. I feel like Brittany, you're probably pretty, I mean, you can get good with the words, don't get me wrong, but visual.
Definitely.
So if you really want to see what this quarry looks like, we do have a picture on our website of it too, just like the Lanark Quarry. So if you wanted to see it, you can see that.
Detective Sergeant John Cathcart coordinated the search and was pretty disappointed because he thought that they would have answers within a few days of searching and have something uncovered. And he even said that he and another person had smelled what they thought was rotting flesh. In 1990, Bill was arrested for forgery and he was sentenced to nearly 3 years in jail. There had also been 4 separate instances in 4 different places in which his financial records were torched in fires. So, a little fishy there.
Definitely not problematic at all.
Twice might be a coincidence, but 4 times is a little hard to explain away.
Honestly, once is a coincidence. Why do your papers just catch fire? Like, get it together.
True.
Maybe get them laminated. I don't
Yeah.
know. Do something.
Just odd.
After the 3rd time, they would have been laminated. Like, come on.
Come on. The case pretty much went cold until 1998 when a bank card with the initial R and then MacRae was found near an old home that was previously owned by Gordon MacRae. But this actually did turn out to be a coincidence. It was actually lost years prior by a woman named Renee MacRae, not Renee. So close. They thought they had something there, but again, it just turned out to be nothing and the lead went dead.
Can you imagine police showing up at her door and her being like, what? You know, like, my name is Reen.
Just one E off. The case then went cold again until 2004. And at that point, 2 separate witnesses came forward about seeing a man acting suspiciously near the Dalmagary Quarry. And if you remember, that's near the lay-by where the car was found on fire. So they saw someone acting suspiciously on the night of the disappearance. One of them said that they saw a man pushing a stroller near the quarry in the downpour rain alone. So just the weather makes that very suspicious, and it being at night and
A man alone with a stroller in the dark, like.
The other witness said that they saw a man dragging what they thought was a dead sheep near this Dalmagary bypass, which again is very strange.
Yeah, like that doesn't happen in the US very often. So I don't know if that happens often in the UK or in Scotland specifically. But if anyone was dragging any kind of animal on the side of a highway, I would probably be a little concerned.
Yes. Interestingly, Renee actually had a sheepskin coat on when she disappeared. So I don't know if this had anything to do with that situation or not. Again, they searched the quarry, but they weren't able to find anything. They had forensic anthropologists, archaeologists, forensic scientists, thermal imaging, the whole 9 yards. They even had an expert named Sue Black, who was a forensic scientist that had helped uncover many grave sites from various wars. That year, the case was featured on a television show in Scotland and throughout the UK, and interest in the case was really reignited. This prompted Bill McDowell to come out again and kind of end his silence and say, quote, "I didn't do it. It's all starting up again, and it's a nightmare for myself and Rosemary. It keeps following us around. We can't escape it, but I didn't do it," end quote.
No one said you did, bud. But thanks for reiterating.
In 2006, the police attempted to name a prime suspect, but the prosecutor said that there just wasn't enough evidence to actually close the case on this. And the suspect isn't named, but it has been said in several different places that this suspect actually fled to the US at that time and stayed gone for many years to come. So maybe that was just a coincidence, or maybe it was a suspicious act, but we don't really have further information on that suspect.
At this time, a man named Brian McGregor got involved with the case. He was a farmer in the area of Inverness, and he was pretty frustrated with the way that it was going about. He was like, things aren't getting done. And obviously, if this was the longest lasting missing persons case, he was probably pretty frustrated at this point. It was like, let's get it together, UK, which we can't talk. We have so many missing person cases here. Yeah. But he decided to take matters into his own hands, and he placed an ad in the newspaper that told witnesses that if they were refusing to speak to the police or uncomfortable to go report anything, that they should just come to him with information and that he would handle it. Mind you, this is a farmer, just a random old farmer in the town. And that week, 2 men actually came forward with some really interesting information. They said that they were working on resurfacing the roads over in that area of A9 near the Dalmagary Quarry. I don't know if I said that right, but Dalmagary, Quarry. And that they had left an area of the road very well patched at the end of their shift, kind of sealing it up for the night. When they returned to work the next morning, their digger had been moved and the tarmac had been stirred up as if done by an amateur. They didn't mention this because they really thought that this case with Renee was just a runaway situation and that it wasn't anything related to that. But then I guess the more they thought on it over the time passing, they were like, maybe that's kind of weird that happened. The men ended up showing Brian the location of the disturbance, and he used his own funds to scan the tarmac in question. He discovered this anomaly beneath the tarmac, and it's believed to be Andrew's Silver Cross stroller. He told this to the police, and they thought that it was possible. They agreed with him, and they planned to do some more research into it and figure things out. But they said that the A9 was going to undergo a widening soon, and that it was kind of underway, and that when that happened, they would look for the stroller in that area. In 2010, more road work was ordered, and there was a push from locals that thought that the body was going to be buried under the road, but we're not really sure if it's been done yet. By around April 2020 was the last we heard about that kind of going on. So we're not sure if they ever conducted the road work. I mean, that was like 10 years ago, but we all know that sometimes construction goes on forever. Where we live, it's like never ending. So who really knows? And especially in another country, we don't know their systems and stuff, so it's kind of hard to say. 6 years later, in 2016, police and Morag Governs, which is Renee's sister, if you forgot, made an appeal for witnesses to come forward with information, but nothing really came from it. In 2019, a month-long search of the Leonac and Damagari quarries was conducted. The Damagari quarry was fully drained, and they tore up some fir trees using different bulldozers, and over 50 cars were removed from the quarry, along with some random items that were all being analyzed. But can we just talk about 50 cars were in this quarry? Like, no one's dug them out. And, like, if the road's that bad where 50 people are running into the quarry and no one's doing anything about it, like, fix it.
I mean, they said that it was a popular place for dumping trash, so I wonder if people were just, like,
dumping their
cars,
cars.
their whole junkers in there.
That should be so concerning.
Honestly, I feel like there's probably other unsolved crimes that could be solved with, like,
honestly,
things in that quarry.
How did you know a body wasn't in one of those cars' trunks? You didn't. Everyone just left them at the bottom. I feel like it would have probably been a pretty cool dive site, not gonna lie. But that's a little much in these little quarries, you know. They also removed more than 100,000 tons of earth and silt, and they had some people analyze them and go through all of these. Like, I think they got, like, archaeologists and stuff to go through it. They did find some bone fragments that they later determined to be animal and stroller parts that matched the same stroller that Renee had for Andrew. But however, this has never been officially connected to their disappearance in any way. Authorities also did some aerial photos, but they still found nothing. They wanted to see what was there, but the bulldozer had a rental on it and they couldn't keep it much longer because it was kind of expensive, as we mentioned before. So they ended up having to send it back without doing more searching. So weeks later, we saw in one location that police flew to Spain to interview a witness who had come forward like 43 years later, which is insane. But I only read this in one place. I don't know if, Brittany, you saw it anywhere else. So we can't really confirm or deny this part. It was just like one statement that we saw. But it was after this statement that supposedly the police went and immediately arrested Bill McDowell in September of 2019 at the age of 77 on the charges of 2 murders and 2 for perversion of justice. Now, keep in mind, this was right before COVID hit. COVID hit probably 6 months after this is when it really, for us in the US, so I don't even know about over in Scotland when it hit there. But just keep that in mind that, this court proceeding section isn't really long. They basically had a brief hearing and he made no plea at it and was granted bail. The preliminary hearing was scheduled to be held on October 12th in 2020 at the High Court in Glasgow. Obviously, we're like in the midst of COVID at that point, like at its peak. So it's kind of hard to figure out if it actually happened. We've been trying to look up stuff. We can't find anything that even says that it occurred. There was said to be a delay due to COVID, but obviously it's been
6 6 months almost.
Yeah, since October. So, but the police stated that they do have vital evidence and information, and no one else has been correlated to the disappearance. So I think they are pretty sure that they have their guy. But because of COVID, like we said, it's just taking a really long time to process in court.
Yeah, so many cases are getting dragged out because of that. But if you live in the area and have any information, definitely let us know. And if we hear anything, we will update all of you guys as soon as we hear any new news on it.
Yeah, please send us information if you know anything. If you live in the Glasgow area or in Inverness or Edinburgh, even, I'm sure they know a little bit because they're pretty close to each other. So let us know if you know anything.
So obviously there's not a ton of information in this case as far as evidence, and police are pretty sure that Bill is the one that killed Renee, but there's some other theories that have been thrown around, so we're going to talk about some of those now. Obviously the first one is that Bill killed Renee and Andrew, or killed Renee and then ran off with Andrew and took him somewhere else. He may have wanted to end the affair and maybe not have his wife find out, or who knows what kind of secrets were about to come out or anything like that. There's also a theory that Rosemary may have found out about Renee and Andrew, and she's the one that murdered them, or maybe even like ordered a hit on them. And then she may have forced Bill to keep the secret and even help her get rid of the bodies. And that's why a man was seen the night of the disappearance, and maybe even why Rosemary dragged him out of the police station.
Side note, Gordon, I know he's been kind of scratched off, but he could have also hired a hitman, and that's why he has scrap clean, and he's made of money for the most part in this time period. So he could have easily still offered up the 1,000, shown his interest. Maybe that's why he was all like, let's not be so hard on her. But he could have hired a hitman as well. Another theory for you, coming in hot.
That's true. Some people think that maybe Gordon was upset after finding out that Andrew wasn't his biological child and kind of went crazy. So maybe he murdered them. Maybe he hired someone to do it. That's definitely a theory that's been tossed out. But then that makes you think like maybe Gordon would have wanted to kill Bill or take it farther, and maybe he didn't because that would be real suspicious. But I feel like that one's a little bit far-fetched, but definitely could be. You know, they always say it's most likely the spouse or the closest person to you. Another theory is that someone, like a complete stranger, just came along and saw an opportunity to commit a crime and saw her alone in the, bad weather with a child, and kind of took that opportunity to harm them.
Ted Bundy, Israel Keys style, like just went for it.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. They could have been abducted, murdered, even human trafficked. So there's a lot that could come of that theory.
Here's another Hallie theory.
And yes, the last theory that our very own Hallie thought of was that maybe Renee lied to Val and said that she was planning on visiting Bill, and lied to Gordon saying she was planning on visiting her sister, just to kind of tie up all those things. And then maybe she just took Andrew and bounced. Maybe she knew things were not going to go forward with Bill, and that she just wanted to get away, start over somewhere else. She knew that her other child was totally safe and, with his dad. And maybe she thought that she just needed to take Andrew and go. I think that the suitcase being missing from the car is pretty suspicious, because if someone was going to torch it anyway, why take the suitcase? Like the stroller I kind of get, but the suitcase I think kind of lends to that theory.
And the stroller. She would need that for her son.
So she could have hitchhiked or gotten picked up by someone else, or, been taken by someone to another town and started over.
Crazier things have happened.
Yeah, that was a lot easier in the 70s than it would be today. She could just change her name. Sometimes even they have like shelters for women that are
runaways.
So they wouldn't necessarily ask for a lot of information, and she could have just vanished on her own accord and stayed missing all this time. If you have any information on this case, you can contact the police by dialing 101. You can also contact Crimestoppers at 0800-55111, or you can email. There's an inbox for the police department in Inverness, and we'll have that on our website and in the show notes. So
Yeah, it's a pretty hefty email
yeah, I'm
address.
not going to say the whole thing, but it'll be in the show notes. It'll be on our website, so you can definitely find it. And if you have any information, shoot it that way.
If you're ever traveling the A9 of Inverness, be cautious on the rainy, dark nights. You never know who may be lurking nearby.